The crystalline spires of Kythera Prime had once sung with harmonic frequencies that could be heard across 3 star systems. Now they barely whispered, their light dimming as the bioplague crept through every atmospheric filter the Kythera had built over millennia. Elder Velthara pressed her translucent hand against the observation deck's surface, watching another residential tower go silent. Inside, families that had lived for centuries were dying in mere days. The plague was not natural. It was a weapon crafted by the Vorthok Empire, designed specifically to target the Kythera's unique crystalline biology. What made it particularly cruel was its precision. It killed slowly, allowing the victims to feel every moment of their cellular structure breaking down. The Vorthok had done this to 11 other species before the Kythera. Each time they waited until the population was nearly extinct, then swooped in to harvest whatever resources remained. Elder Communications Officer Zethera approached with trembling limbs. The Council of 12 has fallen to 6. The remaining members are ... fading. Closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her species' extinction pressing down on her shoulders. The Kythera had been peaceful for over 10,000 years. They had no weapons, no military, no concept of warfare beyond ancient historical records. They had trusted in their isolation and their philosophy of non-interference to keep them safe. Many children remain? She asked quietly. Approximately 40,000, Elder. But the plague adapts faster than our medical teams can respond. We estimate 72 hours before total population collapse. Velthara turned away from the dying city below. Send the message. All frequencies, all languages we have in our databases. Send it to anyone who might listen. Elder, our xenobiology. Studies suggest most species would not risk exposure to help strangers. The plague could potentially adapt to other biological systems. Then we find the one species that would risk everything for strangers, Velthara replied. Send it. The message went out across the galaxy, a desperate plea translated into over 400 languages. Most would ignore it. Some would offer sympathy, but no action. But somewhere among the stars, there might be someone who would hear the cries of dying children and decide that was unacceptable. 3 days later, and 28,000 light-years away, Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station received the transmission. Dr. Kim Soo-jin had been working the night shift when the signal came through, stronger than any they had ever received. The translation software worked for hours to decode the crystalline mathematical language. But when the words finally appeared on her screen, she forgot to breathe. We are the Kythera. We are dying. Our children are dying. We have no weapons, no armies, no way to fight back. If anyone can hear this message, if anyone in the galaxy believes that innocence deserves protection, please help us. We do not ask for glory or recognition. We ask only for the chance to live. Attached to the message were biological scans, chemical compositions of the plague, and coordinates to their home system. Dr. Kim Soo-jin stared at the data, her mind racing. The plague was sophisticated, clearly artificial, designed to target one specific species. But the Kythera had also included their own biological data, essentially providing a blueprint for creating a cure. They're giving us everything we need to help them, she whispered to her empty laboratory. They're trusting complete strangers with their most sensitive biological information. She picked up her communication device with shaking hands. Get me, Director Park. Priority Alpha. We have a situation. Director Park Hyun-woo arrived at the facility within an hour, his hair disheveled from sleep, but his eyes sharp with focus. As Dr. Kim Soo-jin explained the situation, his expression grew increasingly grim. How long do they have? He asked. Based on their population decline rates, maybe 72 hours, maybe less. Park was quiet for a long moment, staring at the translated message. And you're certain this isn't some kind of trap, sir? They're sharing their complete biological database. If someone wanted to hurt us, they wouldn't make themselves this vulnerable. They're desperate. Within 6 hours, President Lee Min-ho sat in the emergency council chamber, listening to the same briefing. Around the table, military advisors, scientists, and politicians debated the risks. The journey to Kythera Prime would require untested faster-than-light technology. The plague might adapt to human biology. Vorthok Empire might see human intervention as an act of war. Sir General Bay spoke up. Our intelligence suggests the Vorthok have superior military technology. If we intervene, we could be inviting them to Earth. President Lee Min-ho studied the image of Cathera Prime on the main screen. Even from space, the dying world looked beautiful, its crystalline structures creating patterns of light that seemed to pulse with fading life. How many children did they say were left? Approximately 40,000, sir. But the number is dropping. Rapidly, the room fell silent. President Lee Min-ho stood up slowly, his decision already made. We go. We help. That's what we do. The Cathera had hoped for miracles. Earth was about to answer with something far more dangerous. Admiral Yoon Dahai walked through the massive hangar bay of Earth's orbital shipyard, her boots echoing against the metal floor. Around her, engineers and technicians worked frantically to prepare ships that were never meant to travel beyond Earth's solar system. The fleet looked like a collection of spare parts held together by hope and determination. The cargo hauler, its mountain bearer, had been stripped of its civilian registration, numbers and fitted with experimental shield generators. Its captain, a gruff man named Choi Taemin, supervised the installation of weapons systems that violated every space treaty Earth had ever signed. If we're going to help these crystal people, he told his crew, we're going to do it properly. Medical frigate Healing Wind had been Captain Nam Jae-hoon's pride for 15 years. He had used it to deliver supplies to Mars colonies and provide emergency medical care to asteroid miners. Now its cargo holds were packed with experimental cure compounds that Dr. Kim Soo-jin's team had synthesized based on Cathera biological data. The ship's medical bay had been converted into a mobile laboratory, capable of mass-producing treatments in space. Captain, his medical officer, Dr. Kang So-young, approached with a tablet full of data. The cure compounds are stable, but we've never tested them on actual Cathara biology. We're essentially flying blind. Nam Ji-hoon nodded grimly. We're all flying blind on this mission. But those children don't have time for us to run proper tests. At the center of the makeshift fleet was the research vessel Bright Discovery. Now serving as Admiral Yoon's flagship, the ship's powerful computers had been reprogrammed to coordinate the experimental, faster-than-light drives that made this mission possible. Chief Engineer Oh Min-sik had not slept in 3 days, running calculations and simulations that pushed the boundaries of human physics. Admiral, Oh Min-sik called out as she entered the bridge. The FTL drives are ready, but I need to be honest about our chances. Yoon Dahai looked at the engineer, seeing the exhaustion in his eyes. Give me the real numbers. The theoretical models give us a 12% chance of surviving the jump intact. The drives were designed for short-distance travel, maybe to the nearest star system. We're asking them to carry us 28,000 light-years in a single jump. Oh, and if we don't make it? Best-case scenario, we get scattered across the galaxy and spend the rest of our lives trying to find each other. Worst case, we get torn apart at the atomic level. Admiral Yoon walked to the observation window, looking out at Earth's blue marble, hanging in space. Children were asking their parents if the space people would be okay. What? About the Cathera? She asked quietly. Without our intervention, they'll be extinct within 48 hours. She turned back to the engineer. Then we take the 12% chance. The final preparations took 18 hours. Each ship had to be fitted with the experimental FTL drives, their navigation computers synchronized to prevent the fleet from being scattered across space. The drives themselves were barely larger than refrigerators. Running final checks on the cure compounds. His grandmother had always told him that humans were too stubborn to know when something couldn't be done. Looking at the bottles of synthesized medicine, he hoped her wisdom would prove true once again. All stations, this is Admiral Yoon-her. Voice crackled across the fleet's communication system. We're about to attempt something that every physics textbook says is impossible. We're going to travel further than any human has ever traveled, faster than any human has ever traveled to help people we've never met. The bridge crews of each ship began their countdown sequences. Engineers monitored power levels that pushed their reactors to dangerous limits. Navigation officers plotted courses through space that existed only in theoretical mathematics. Remember, Admiral Yoon continued, we're not just representing Earth today. We're representing the idea that no one should die alone, that no child should suffer while others who can help choose to look away. The FTL drives began to charge, creating energy signatures that made Earth satellites malfunction. Space around the fleet began to shimmer and bend. Of the Cathara children who were dying while she spoke, all ships execute jump sequence. The fleet vanished from Earth's solar system in a burst of impossible light. Behind them, families prayed for their return. Ahead lay a dying world that had placed its faith in a species known for turning the impossible into the inevitable. Space twisted around them as human determination bent the laws of physics to its will. The journey that should have taken months was compressed into minutes. The universe reshaping itself to accommodate humanity's refusal to accept that some things couldn't be done. In the depths of space, between one heartbeat and the next, the fleet traveled further than any human had ever imagined possible. Carrying hope to a world that had run out of time, the Cathara system looked like a graveyard when the human fleet arrived. What had once been a beautiful collection of worlds now showed the scars of systematic destruction. Cathara Prime hung in space like a dying ember. Massive Vorthok plague ships moved in slow, patient circles. Was the size of a small moon, their hulls covered in organic growths that pulsed with sickly green light. These vessels were not just weapons, they were living creatures. Bred by the Vorthok to spread death across entire star systems. Commander Grextal stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Plaguebringer, watching his bioweapons do their work. The Vorthok were not like other species. They had evolved on a world where only the strong survived, where showing mercy meant becoming prey. Their philosophy was simple: take what you need, destroy what you cannot use, and never leave witnesses. Commander, his sensor officer clicked. Through the Vorthek's chittering language, the Cathara population has dropped below 50,000. Can begin harvesting operations within 12 hours. Grextal nodded with satisfaction. The Cathara had been easier to break than most species. They had no weapons, no military, no understanding of warfare. They had simply watched their world die, sending pathetic messages into space that no one would answer. That was when space itself seemed to tear apart. The human fleet materialized in the system, like ghosts becoming solid. One moment, empty space, stretched between the outer planets. The next, dozens of ships appeared in perfect formation. Impossible, Commander Grextal hissed, his claws scraping against his command console. The Vorthok had conquered 12 systems over the past century, and had faced desperate last stands where entire civilizations threw themselves into hopeless battles. They had encountered noble sacrifices where heroes died to buy their people a few more hours of life. They had seen clever strategies where weaker species tried to outsmart their superior technology, but they had never faced a species that had crossed impossible distances not to conquer, but to heal. Admiral Yoon Dahai stood on the bridge of the Bright Discovery, looking at the tactical display that showed the Vorthok fleet. The plague ships were massive, but they moved slowly, designed for siege warfare rather than direct combat. Her own fleet was smaller, faster, and driven by something the Vorthok could not understand. Open all frequencies, she ordered her communications officer. Frequencies open, Admiral. Her voice crackled across the star system, reaching every ship, every listening post, every surviving Cathara settlement. This is Admiral Yoon Dahai of the Terran fleet. You have exactly 60 seconds to withdraw from this system before we demonstrate why humans don't ask permission to help the innocent. The Vorthok bridge fell silent. Commander Grextal stared at his screens, trying to understand what he was seeing. Importantly, they had appeared in his system without warning, using faster-than-light travel that his scientists claimed was impossible. They're bluffing, he finally announced to his crew. No species would risk war with the Vorthok Empire too. Save strangers. But even as he said it, Grextal felt uncertainty creeping into his mind. The humans had already done something impossible by reaching this system. What else might they be capable of? Bright Discovery, watching her targeting systems analyze the Vorthok fleet. The plague ships were biological, which meant they would respond differently to human weapons than mechanical targets. Firing solutions. Admiral, she reported. Targeting systems have full locks on all enemy vessels. They're not moving. Admiral Yoon looked at the countdown timer on her screen. 57 seconds had passed since her ultimatum. The Vorthok were testing her resolve, trying to determine if humanity would actually fight for strangers they had never met. Remind them that mercy and fury often wear the same face, she replied grimly. Captain Nam Jae-hoon's voice came across the fleet communication system from the healing wind. Admiral, I'm reading massive bioweapon signatures from the planets. Surface, the Cathera don't have much time. Captain Choi Taemin added from the Mountain Bearer, my cargo holds are loaded with kinetic penetrators. Give the word, and we'll show these monsters what human freight haulers can do. The 60 seconds expired. Vorthok fleet remained in orbit, their plague ships continuing to pour death onto the world below. Commander Grextall had made his choice. He would not be intimidated by unknown aliens who claimed to fight for charity. Admiral Yoon Da-hai looked at her tactical display one last time. The Vorthok had weapons that could destroy planets. They had conquered civilizations that had lasted for millennia. They had turned warfare into an art form of cruelty and destruction. But they had never faced humans who were angry on behalf of someone else's children. All ships, she announced calmly, weapons free. Show them what happens when you make humans choose between mercy and fury. What followed wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. It was something the galaxy had never seen before, demonstration of human creativity turned into a weapon by desperate compassion. Captain Nam Jae-hoon made the first move. His medical ship Healing Wind had been designed to save lives, not take them. But as he watched the Vorthok plague ships continue their slow destruction of Cathara Prime, he made a decision that would be remembered across the stars. All medical staff to escape pods, he announced over his ship's intercom. We're about to turn a hospital into a missile. The Healing Wind accelerated toward the largest Vorthok plague ship, its medical bay computers working frantically to reprogram the healing nanobots in its cargo holds. These tiny machines had been designed to repair damaged tissue and fight disease. Now they were being converted into something far more dangerous. Microscopic warriors that could consume the biological components of Vorthok technology, the plague ships. Organic whole began to dissolve as millions of nanobots ate through its living armor. What had been designed to heal Cathara children was now destroying the weapon that threatened to kill them. Commander, Grextall watched in horror as his flagship's hull began to bubble and melt. Impossible. How are they turning medical equipment into weapons? Captain Choi Taemin's cargo hauler Mountain Bearer had spent 15 years moving freight between Earth's colonies. Its loading systems were designed to launch cargo containers into space for pickup by other vessels. Now those same systems were hurling solid metal projectiles at velocities that turned them into kinetic weapons. Loading Bay 1, fire, Choi commanded, and a shipping container accelerated toward a Vorthok plague ship at nearly 10% of light speed. The impact created an explosion that lit up the entire star system. The Vorthok had never faced an enemy like this. Every human ship seemed to have been transformed into something deadly. Research vessels became electronic warfare platforms, jamming Vorthok communications and turning their own bioweapons against them. Supply ships launched clouds of industrial nanobots that ate through plague ship hulls like acid. Engineer Min-Sik's voice echoed across the fleet from his position aboard the Bright Discovery. Remember, we're not here to conquer. We're here to remove obstacles to healing. The distinction was important. The humans weren't trying to destroy the Vorthok fleet out of anger or revenge. They were systematically eliminating threats to the innocent with the same methodical precision. They might use to clear debris from a shipping lane. Admiral Yoon Da-hai coordinated the attack from her flagship, watching as her improvised weapons found their marks. The Vorthok plague ships were massive and powerful, but they were designed for siege warfare against helpless planets. They had never been built to face an enemy that could turn peaceful cargo haulers into railgun platforms. Admiral Lieutenant Cho Min-ah reported from her weapons console. The enemy is trying to retreat. Should we pursue? Negative. Let them run. We're here to save lives, not take them. The Vorthok, who had terrorized the galaxy through biological warfare, faced an enemy that turned every tool into a weapon of liberation. Their plague ships fell not to superior firepower, but to the creative fury of a species that refused to let children die while they watched. Dr. Kong, Sa Young's voice came over the medical frequency. Admiral, I'm reading massive bioweapon neutralization. Across the planet's surface, the nanobots are working. The plague is dying. Commander Grextal's plague ship, Plaguebringer, spun helplessly in space. Its organic systems failing as human nanobots consumed its living whole. He had conquered 12 star systems. He had watched entire civilizations beg for mercy. He had never shown weakness, never retreated, never admitted defeat. But he had never faced humans who were angry on behalf of someone else's children. "What are you?" he transmitted on all frequencies, his voice a mixture of terror and incomprehension. Lieutenant Chomanaw's response came immediately, her voice calm and clear. "We're the ones who show up when miracles are needed." It's the remaining Vorthok ships began to retreat, their commanders realizing they faced an enemy that fought by completely different rules. These humans had traveled impossible distances, not to conquer territory or gather resources, but simply to help strangers who needed aid. Captain Nam Jahoon's escape pod was picked up by a rescue shuttle, as his medical ship completed its transformation into a kinetic weapon. He watched through the viewport as the healing wind struck the last plague ship, its hull dissolving under the assault of reprogrammed medical nanobots. "My grandmother always said we were too stubborn to know when something couldn't be done," he murmured to himself. The space around Cathara Prime began to clear as the last Vorthok vessels fled the system. Behind them, they left a planet that was already beginning to heal. The bioplague that had seemed unstoppable was being consumed by nanobots originally designed to cure disease. Admiral Dune. Hai looked at her tactical display, watching the enemy retreat. The human fleet had taken casualties, several ships had been damaged, and the healing wind was completely destroyed. But they had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had crossed impossible distances to help strangers, then turned peaceful vessels into weapons of liberation when necessary. The Cathara were going to live. That was all that mattered. The space around Cathara Prime fell silent as the last Vorthok plague ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, where there had been the constant hum of bioweapons and the crackle of energy discharges. Now there was only the gentle whisper of solar wind and the distant songs of the crystalline cities. Below, Dr. Kim Soo-jin stood in the shuttle bay of the Bright Discovery, watching as medical teams prepared to descend to the planet's surface. She had spent 3 sleepless days synthesizing the cure compounds, working from biological data that the Cathara had shared with complete strangers. Now she would finally see if her work had been enough. The shuttle Mercy 1 touched down in the central plaza of Cathara Prime's capital city. As the doors opened, Dr. Kim stepped onto alien soil for the first time in human history. The crystalline structures around her hummed with faint melodies, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that seemed to dance with joy. Elder Velthera approached slowly, her translucent form moving with the careful grace of someone who had been dying just hours before. The nanobots had worked quickly, consuming the bioplague and restoring the natural balance of the Cathara's unique biology. But the emotional scars would take much longer to heal. Dr. Kim Velthara spoke in perfect English, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Your people have given us back our future." Around the plaza, Cathara children emerged from buildings that had been silent for months. Their crystal-like skin glowed with healthy light, their movements quick and playful as they explored their world without fear for the first time since the plague began. Dr. Kim watched a group of young ones playing a game that involved creating musical patterns with their bodies, their laughter echoing off the crystalline walls. Captain Nam Ji-hoon arrived on the second shuttle, his face showing the exhaustion of someone who had pushed himself beyond all reasonable limits. His medical ship was gone, destroyed in the battle, but the smile on his face suggested he had no regrets. "The medical stations are operating at full capacity," he reported to Dr. Kim. "We're distributing cure compounds to every settlement on the planet. The Cathara healers are incredibly skilled, They're already improving on our formulas. Dr. Kang Soyoung approached from the temporary medical camp they had established. Doctor, you need to see this. The Cathara aren't just recovering, they're sharing everything they know about biomedicine with us. Their crystalline biology gives them insights into healing that we never imagined. But it was Elder Valthera's question that stopped Dr. Kim. In her tracks, the Cathara leader looked at her with eyes that held the wisdom of millennia, her voice filled with genuine wonder. Why? She asked. Why did you come so far for strangers? Your people risked everything, your lives, your ships, your safety, for a species you had never met. We have nothing to offer you in return. Dr. Kim looked around at the healing city, at the children playing in the plaza, at the medical teams working side by side with Cathara healers. She thought about the impossible journey, the experimental technology. The battles fought not for conquest, but for the simple right of others to exist. Captain Nam Jahoon answered before she could speak. Despite his exhaustion, despite losing his ship, despite the dangers they had all faced, he simply smiled, because someone needed help, and we could give it. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of humanity's first contact with the galaxy. Not as conquerors or explorers or traders, but as people who had heard crying children and decided that was unacceptable. Over the following days, Humamedics worked alongside Cathara healers to distribute the cure to every corner of the planet. Admiral Yoon Dahai coordinated relief efforts while her engineers helped repair the atmospheric filters that had been damaged by the bioplague. The cargo ships that had served as improvised weapons now carried medical supplies and food to isolated communities. The human fleet prepared to depart after 2 weeks of recovery efforts. They asked for nothing in return of territory. No resources, no glory. Admiral Yoon refused the Cathara's offers of rare crystals and advanced technology. The humans had come to help, and helping was its own reward. Elder Valthara stood in the communication center of her city, preparing to send one final message to Earth. The transmission would take months to reach humanity's home system. But she wanted the people of Earth to know what their sacrifice had meant. To the people of Earth, she began, her voice carrying across the stars. You have shown us that miracles are not supernatural events. They are what happens when ordinary people decide that suffering is unacceptable. Thank you. The message was simple, but it carried more meaning than any treaty or trade agreement. 2 words that would echo across the galaxy. Thank you. The real miracle wasn't the cure, or the impossible journey, or even the successful battle against the Vorthok. The real miracle was the precedent humanity had established. The galaxy now knew that somewhere among the stars, species existed that would cross impossible distances not to conquer, but to help. News of the Cathara rescue spread through galactic communication networks at light speed. Other species began to whisper of the humans, the ones who turned charity into warfare and made the impossible look routine. Some were curious, others were fearful. But all were forced to reconsider what they thought they knew about the nature of interstellar contact. Earth had announced its presence to the galaxy, not with conquest, but with compassion backed by an iron will to protect the innocent.